Date on the 2021 redistricting. Mr. Manager.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members, our consultant for the evening.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, Robert Lofton with the law firm of McGuire Woods is here to provide you with an update, to provide you with the plans that you had requested from him, and to receive further direction from City Council so that we can move on to the next phase, which is advertising the redistricting plan and setting the matter for public hearing and advertising the public hearing. So I will turn it over to Mr. Lofton.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, it's good to be back this afternoon. Can everybody hear me? All right.
Yep.
Whoops.
Damn. No, I didn't do that.
I want to make sure my volume's down.
I think that was your phone.
All right, that was not me. I'm here today to walk through sort of where we are, to recap the meetings that I've had with 5 of you since our last discussion in November, and then, as Mr. Hutchings said, to get guidance from you as to how to proceed. So what we're going to do, I'll give a brief overview of the meetings that we've had to date, the meetings that I've had to date with members of City Council. We'll go back over the 2020 data very quickly, and then I'll present Proposal 1 and Proposal 2. These are the same proposals that you saw in November. They have not changed, and I can talk a little bit about that as I go through this. And then at the end, take questions, discussion, although I'm a lot more comfortable being interrupted on the fly, so please feel free to interrupt me as you like. I met with the entire City Council back in November, presented Proposals 1 and 2 to you, and then after that meeting, I've had 3 different meetings with members of City Council to talk through questions that you had. The first one on December 9th was Mr. Ward and Mr. Williams. The second one on December 20th with Mr. Fawcett and Mr. Goldberg. And the third one on January 3rd with Mr. Williams. I'm sorry.
Hold up.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is a typo. Thank you. Yes, January 3rd, that should be Mr. Bennett, not Mr. Williams again. My apologies there. With those meetings, as I shared with each of you, my representation is of the entire City Council. So everything we talked about, was fair game for everyone else to hear and to talk about. I appreciate the questions that were raised and the feedback that I got. And I'll touch on some of the points that were raised as I hit on Proposals 1 and 2. Real briefly, in terms of the 2020 data, the population of Suffolk is 94,324. That's growth from 84,585. The General Assembly 2 years ago made a process where the inmates are allotted to each locality. So from that allotment, the City of Suffolk had a net gain of 170, which took the city's total population to 94,494. And with 7 boroughs, it's straight math. The target for each borough is 13,499. This table is the same table that I've showed you before. This is the current population for each borough without redrawing any lines. So this is before we began the whole process of looking at how the lines would have to shift. As you know, legally, the deviation that's allowed is 5%. Anything above 5%, you start to raise legal concerns. And so you want to stay under 5%, and you want to get as close to 0 as possible. This is a breakdown of the current boroughs of the racial categories. This is the same slide that you've seen before. And then you've seen these before. This is Proposal 1, and this is Proposal 2. And I couldn't make them, this was the benefit of talking with each of you, talking with 5 of you, where we were able to zoom in and look at things a little more clearly. Mr. Ward raised some really good questions, and as I've explained to everybody, the Nansemond Borough and the population growth in the Nansemond Borough is the driver for what we're having to do in terms of how we're having to shift borough lines within the entire city. Mr. Ward raised some really good questions with me about potential ways to redraw lines in the Nansemond Borough. Mr. Ward, I've looked at those, and the big problem, and if you look, and there's a way Andy showed me, so look at that. So one of the missions that I had from the city council in terms of redrawing the borough lines was to ensure that incumbents stayed in their borough. And so what I would say, Mr. Ward, in terms of the very good questions that you raised, the reason why I didn't make a new proposal in looking at how to potentially redraw the Nansemond Borough, there's no way to do that that would not potentially jeopardize keeping incumbents in their current boroughs. And as we've talked, and as I've talked with 5 of you, in looking at these 2 different proposals that I've given you, as you attempt to start shifting lines a little bit, there are domino effects that fall into place that then begin impacting every other borough and the way the lines are currently drawn. So, that's in terms of the questions that have been raised in our one-on-one meetings. That's why Proposal 1 and Proposal 2 have remained Proposal 1 and Proposal 2, because in order to protect incumbents and stay within the deviations and protect neighborhoods, these are and drawing these and looking at different ways to do that. These are the 2 proposals that I've submitted to City Council. They're the same 2 that I submitted back in November. And at this point, I'm happy to answer any other questions that the City Council might have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lofton. Council, questions, comments? Councilman Goldberg?
When does a decision have to be totally made on this? When do we have to finalize it?
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilman Fawcett?
First off, Mr. Lofton, I'd like to thank you for making a time and an opportunity for myself, and of course, Mr. Goldberg was with me. We had the discussion on December 9th, or whatever day that was. I found it to be very informative. You kind of answered a lot of the questions, and just from what I gained from it, whether you say option 1 or 2, or whether it refers to map 1 or 2, I would assume that option 2 is map 2, and of course, option 1 would be map 1. Is that correct?
Well, yes, sir. So
Okay.
Proposal 1 is labeled as Proposal 1.
Is map 1, correct?
Yes, sir.
So in looking with that, and we had a pretty in-depth conversation, I believe, if you remember that, I feel more inclined that at this point that map 2 or option 2 was more aligned with what I would think that would be within the boundaries of keeping the demographics, the numbers, the population, and also not chopping the boroughs up to a point where an incumbent could be endangered. And I think you achieved that very well in map 2. I don't believe I feel the same with map 1, the way it was laid out. So moving forward, I'll be more inclined to support option 2, map 2, or however you want to label it, to get this redistricting moving in the direction. Time is of the essence. We are now in January. We have people coming up for election here in November. And, you know, these folks really, by the rule of law, they have the right to start petition driving after January the 2nd of the year. So I feel it's essential that we start thinking about real quickly getting this thing on the table and move it along so that it keeps everybody with a fair opportunity in the upcoming election to get done what they need to get done and to get this thing on the table so that we get past this 10-year mark. So that's kind of where I'm at on this, and I just wanted to thank you. You really kind of enlightened me a lot on some things because you were able to break down that borough, particularly mine and the Nasmith borough, and how things would change if in the event we started driving the lines in some sort of a different direction there. So I just want to say that, and I appreciate what you have presented so far. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Bennett?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Roberts, thank you for the time that you and I spent together.
Yes, sir.
Very productive. I really got a better view of the maps with that by streets. Then I could tell more exactly what the area was composed of. And that gave me a good overview of the two maps. And looking at the two maps and the proposal 1 to me is the one that was saying there would be less scrutiny in the courts if you had to go to court. That was number 1. Number 2, I think it keeps in line kind of with the way the boroughs are laid out at this point, just extending. I know everyone has to expand and numbers have to increase. So I look at 1 and 2. 2 does more to me to put everybody closer in line with what the proposal has been, and as you recommended, I'm taking your word for it, is that it's less challenge would be in court. And I think I like the idea of the map 1, and I think it's fair, and it's much fairer to me knowing the gist of the whole redistricting. With that, 1 would be my preference, and I think it's more equally fair drawn than map 2.
Council, any other comments, questions? Councilman Ward?
Yep. Thank you for giving me credit. And I just see that with all of talking you did talk, where you just named Councilman Ward concern. And I don't like to be in this predicament. Seems like every time I try to do what's right to the community, I'm always pointed out. This been going on for the last 10 years. And what I don't understand, I haven't talked with some of my constituents, and all they talking about right now, what I just heard about drawing, they're not talking about the history of the city of Suffolk. It seems as though as long as I draw a map in certain boroughs, that's fair. 10 years ago, I was on the other side. And for some of the councilmen, I understand what you said, you get new information about the map drawing. Some of these councils have been on for 10, 20, 30 years, and you just get new information? You just understanding what's going on with this map? I can't accept none one of them maps. Because the simple fact is, and I don't want to, I always seem like I'm aggressive, but the simple fact is, if I don't understand, I might don't feel comfortable, and today I don't feel comfortable. You're an expert. And you come and try to tell me that's non-expert, only thing you can do is come with me with a map, and anybody talk about the second map, they don't understand redistricting. The second map is not even, I didn't even spend time with other people who know about drawing a map, and we talk about the second map. I have to say, I'm not, I was telling a guy, I said, y'all might laugh, but I find it very interesting to me. A commentator said, back in the day, some of us know how good announcers was. And they said how good Howard Cosell was. And Howard Cosell was good, but we didn't realize it was good because of the way he explained the game. But John Madden explained that game that everybody understood. He went beyond the regular tradition of explaining the football games. You can see the same football game and look at it, and that's a different way it happened with John Madden. God bless him, he's gone now. But that's the difference. We have a John Madden around that explain this map to those who don't know how to read a map. So what we did was we went to 5 different people. And one of these people helped draw the map the last time. And they couldn't understand why you just couldn't come up with one map. That's 10 years ago. And when you said the first thing, and I really wish you wouldn't say that. I mean, it just bothers me, and I just can't hold my emotions back. It's not true that you cannot draw a map with the incumbent still there. And one thing I also learned is that when the first person come out and talk about offense, that's the first thing you hear. The first map you gave us. And I'm very surprised even that my attorney allowed us to see a map that wasn't nothing. Half of us didn't know where the streaks was at. What is this? Some of us asked. I don't know. This is serious business. Redistricting don't do for 10 years. 10 years. And I asked you some questions. Do you understand what Suffolk had to do? Do you understand that some of the people on the same time they drew this map was a part of it now? And I know that you was a part of it maybe later on. So it was a disagreement then. So now you're gonna come here with me after 10 years, and didn't know what I was doing the first time. But the second time, I got enough time to understand what the word fairness means and redistricting. We have voted, we had this borough, this city, 70-30, couple of city communities, 80-20. You had a couple of minority-majority boroughs. You even had one borough with no intent to, talking about my fellow councilman, was a minority-majority borough and adding prisoners in there who wasn't just from Suffolk, but they added in there for making a minority-majority borough. I got questions I want to ask them. I might can't ask them like I would like to ask them. But I'm just looking at what somebody said, chopped up the boroughs. Chop what boroughs up? I don't mind losing what I have to lose because I can't stop the growth. But when you just chop one off and just chop the tail of it off and chop majority of the minority voters off, and then you just went one way and don't draw another map for me. The other maps were just possibilities that I could sit and talk, we could sit and talk with the council, and you keep saying it's not true. And we did 5 different surveys of people, draw a map, kept it in there. Then we even got a map, and later on I'm gonna pass it out. I don't know if it's legal. Pass it to William. We got somebody to help draw a map that was a part of the 10 years ago. And you gonna tell me it's just one way of drawing the map? I don't agree with that. And I said that to you in your office because I just didn't wake up doing this. Might lose some friends, might get recalled, I don't know, but this, I can't sit here after 10 years and all you do in my borough is cut off majority and minority voters and say, okay, everything is well done. Then, I'm gonna go a little past what I want to talk about. My borough grew from 10 years from now. A couple of other boroughs gonna grow, and you'll be doing the same thing again 10 more years with the growth. And you can still put the deviation under that 5. So and I just hope the council stop rushing and talking about how soon we need this. Last meeting, what we had a meeting said, we want to do it right. I think the people of Suffolk have waited 10 years, that's long enough to wait to make sure the map is right, not to just be on time. And I don't agree with the attorney. I don't agree with that. We want to make this right, this Suffolk. It's the new Suffolk. And I want to ask you a few questions, and I hope I can ask the way some of the people would like to hear, because some of the things you have said already, the first one you said is not true. You can give me more than one map and a half, and I don't see why my constituents sitting here believing you can't draw another map and do not take the incumbent out. A couple of us went through this, and one of them is on the diocese now. And for them to feel that the map is drawn right, well, that wasn't their interest. And I wouldn't have been my interest if I didn't have a problem that somebody else had. I think I would have, but I mean, I'm not faulting anybody with that. Which borough in 2011 had the smallest percentage of minority voters? Asking you.
I don't have that information in front of me. I presume you do, Mr. Ward.
Yeah, but see, that's what I'm saying too.
Well, so
I'm saying, no, I don't know map drawing.
So, Mr. Ward.
No, let me finish. I don't know map drawing, but you got a map, was hired to draw a map.
Mhm.
I don't know if you went back 10 years ago and see what was the problem then to make sure you don't run up to the same problem. I don't know that. So forgive me. So that's why we can't just rush through this. There's some questions people want to know and you don't have the information. So I don't understand my attorney not briefing you on some of the things we had when we fought against this 10 years ago. I'm not being mean or nasty, but this is what I'm saying, my concern. That's my concern. See, because you don't have to answer the question. They're like taking the fifth, and all your statistics look good, and mine don't look worth nothing because
So,
you don't have the answer.
Whoa.
If I could interject something for one moment. Councilman Ward, I appreciate your comments, and I think everybody else does too. Mr. Lofton had two objectives. One, to take into consideration our preferences in drawing the map, which is the three things that we thought were most important in regards to boundaries and not splitting neighborhoods and keeping incumbents where they are. And taking that into consideration, he has an obligation to present us with maps that he believes to the best of his ability
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
that,
You
that's-
said
let
maps.
me just finish what I'm saying, which are legally defensible. So I think he's done that. I do understand what you're saying, and I understand your concerns. It's my understanding at this time that if we are not prepared to move these maps forward at this time, then a motion would be in order from you, and then we in turn to direct Mr. Lofton to prepare another map. However, I think to do that, within your motion, you would have to provide some specific guidance as to what you would like to see in the preparation of an additional map. So my suggestion at this point is if you would like to have another map prepared, that you put it in the form of a motion along with some specific as possible directions to Mr. Lofton, and then he in turn can bring that back to us, once it's voted on. So, and I'm just, if I could just ask the city attorney to confirm that that would be the proper process at this point, if Mr. Ward is not satisfied with the two maps that have been prepared.
Yes, Mayor. So Mr. Lofton is working for City Council, and so City Council has to speak as a body, and that would require a motion and a vote.
Okay, so at this point, where we are at this particular juncture is, Councilman Ward, if you would like another map prepared, then please put that in the form of a motion along with some direction to Mr. Lofton as to some specific changes, or as specific as you can be in the formulation of this other version. And I'll turn it back to you.
Before I put a motion, I just wanted to say that because I want to understand well. I don't like be embarrassed that you had to come in and say that to me when I'm trying to figure out what we're supposed to do. Now listen to what I'm saying, because each time I heard from this Mr. Lawson, he's saying that you can't draw a map with one incumbent. That bothers me. The next thing I hear, that the attorney going to say it got to be done as soon as possible. I got all that. In between all that, we don't have no conversation at all with nobody. I mean, that is totally wrong. How I feel how important the redistricting is. If the attorney would come talk to me, or somebody would talk to me and say, well, Councilman Ward, well, this meeting going to be about what are the things you need, what's with the ball, let's get this done before we come out openly. I've been on here 11 years, 8 years. First thing I said, just a couple of council said they almost ready to vote on two maps. Well, I ain't ready to vote because y'all not even talking about half the things what redistricting is about. Ain't nobody said about retrogression. Ain't nobody said about this borough supposed to be the borough that minorities can vote in. Some of them probably even know. I don't know what he told them. He didn't come out. The only thing he talked about what Mr. Ward said. I want to know that the people of Suffolk, minority majority borough, have a fair chance and have what's legal. Only thing he says legal is deviation.
But
that's all. If you want to do that, Mayor, that's fine. But right now, I'll make a motion that we do not vote on this map and that Mr. Lofton come back with a few maps and get a better understanding, or tell us understanding those who don't understand redistricting, what it's about. Redistricting is not about just drawing a map. If these map is not right, we got 10 years of the same map. Cutting off, it's not me. 3 and out, it's not me. It's being fair to the other people who have an opportunity to run 10 years from now. This is what it's all about. And two elections within that 10 years, people can have to run. If it's not fair, retrogression. We have one borough that is the city of the Suffolk borough, was the borough that Well, a majority minority can pick the person that they want. If that borough didn't have that, you had a backup, was the National Borough. Now, they didn't cut that borough out of being the backup. Okay, well, I made a motion, and I hope, that's what I mean. I made a motion that he come back with another map, and I think better information.
I'm gonna ask you for some more clarification. You know, it's my understanding we are not voting on a map tonight.
I don't know what.
One map,
I'm
two
just
maps,
trying to
we're not
know.
voting on anything.
Okay.
We have agreed to have a public hearing before there is any vote.
Okay.
So our next decision will be, do we want to have one map put forward or two maps put forward to be presented at the public hearing, which would allow for public input and still the option for us to modify the map to some point. So what we're looking for is the larger picture. Are we satisfied with the original drawing of this map? Not that it can't be subject to some small changes once we have our public hearing, and whether it's decided whether we want to bring option one, option two, or do we want to bring both options to be presented at the public hearing? So at this point, like I said, your motion would be to have, I'm going to try to repeat, your motion would be to have Mr. Lofton prepare an additional map. My suggestion would be that that motion includes some specifics, if you will, or some points that he could incorporate into that map. There is somewhat of a time frame. As soon as possible is a good answer, but from everything I read, we need to have this done by the end of February. That doesn't mean we can't take a little bit more time and look at it. It will only take Mr. Lofton a few days or so, hopefully, to come up with another version. So while time is of the essence, it is feasible and realistic to bring forth another map, if that's what this body would like to do. So is there any further direction that you would like Mr. Lofton to adhere to in the formulation of this other map, or do you just want to make the motion to do another map, and then you would have further conversation with him to talk about, and anyone else on council would also have the opportunity? In other words, the motion can be to have Mr. Lofton draw another map, with the understanding that everybody on this body will have another opportunity to speak to Mr. Lofton if they are desirous of doing so before he comes back with that map. Is that suitable?
That's close, but it's just like what I'm used to. Is the fact is, it's certain things that he can change on the map, that the map is, to me, just as good as the map he had. That's the only reason I would, for us to just say, the first map is good, y'all haven't seen but one map. Really. The second map, y'all haven't seen but one map. A map that is worse than the second map. So where I get, if we do this tonight, and nobody say, well, I think the map is good. Nobody went against what he drawn. So what's the next thing? A motion to accept it? I don't know. What we here for? That's what I'm saying, man.
I say, if we're not going to do specifics, then your motion would be to have Mr. Lofton draw another map for our consideration, with the opportunity for each council member to weigh in on the formulation of that third map. Obviously, with you having, the most concern over it, then you would be speaking with Mr. Lofton along with everywhere else, and he'll bring back a third map. Is that feasible, Mr. Lofton?
Yes, sir.
So that would be the motion. So, Vice Mayor Bennett?
Yeah, just a comment on that. My mind, recollect, if I'm thinking right, is that when we first started the process, that was one of the requests that was made, that we would have three maps. we said that when we first started talking about it, do 3 maps. And it came back with 2, which nobody, didn't say, well, we still want to do the 3, but it was asked that we would do 3 maps, and it was only brought back with 2 maps. So, kind of what Councilman Ward is saying is that the 3rd map at first were asked for, but we didn't get the 3rd map, and I don't know what the 3rd map would look like, or what changes would have to be made to do a 3rd map, but that was some of my concern. I'm kind of like him going through the process before with 1 and 2 maps. That's where a lot of the discussion were, and it ended up in that you have more of a choice if you had the 3rd map, and I had to get to this point, but that would have helped a whole lot with having the 3 choices instead of just 2.
Mr. Williams, Councilman Williams?
Yes, Mayor. I'm going to second Mr. Councilman Ward's motion. However, before I do that, I have a question for Mr. Lofton. And that question is, when you come back with maps, that's assuming that council agreed to vote on you bringing back another map, will it be possible for you to show us the maps for the public's sake with the street names on the map like we did in your office, as opposed to just having a drawing, but actually bringing back a map with the actual street on that map so the public will be able to see those streets as it affects their area or affects the boroughs?
In terms of a printout?
Even when you're doing it on the screen, being able to zoom it in enough so we can actually see the streets.
Yes, we can do that.
Because now we're looking at maps, a drawing of maps, but there's no way of knowing, unless you know every street in this city, which streets affects which borough. So it would be more helpful to the public and to us to be able to identify those different boroughs with showing the streets as part of your mapping or your presentation. And with that, I'd like to second Councilman Ward's motion.
Councilman Goldberg?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Lofton, dealing with the drawings and the maps, and Proposal 1 and Proposal 2, you have to keep us on the right track, I'll say that, because we have to get this approved through the Attorney General's office, so it has to be approved. You've been trying to keep us in that it can be approved through the system. Am I correct on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so you've lined this up, and you have to have some type of, when you do these, some type of boundary, interstate, road, street, somehow to be able to divide, to show that. I assume that it could pass muster when it gets to the next higher level. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's why I don't know whether you need a 3rd one or not. The 2 proposals I've seen from the standpoint of the downtown borough, Suffolk borough, doesn't matter which one, really. It's not a big difference. I think I've got 20 more people or whatever, and it doesn't matter. I personally, from the proposal that I saw, and I think I talked to you about this, Proposal 2 showed up better, but I could go with either one. But I thought, again, that you were doing it by certain boundaries to keep us compliant so that we would be able to pass and not have some other force coming in saying you have to do it this way or that way or whatever. I think I'm correct in that, right?
Yes, sir. Proposal 1 and Proposal 2, what I have endeavored to do or draw as the mayor articulated at the beginning of the meeting, legally defensible proposals to give to you, because it's ultimately your decision.
Right,
Um,
gotcha.
So that is what I've endeavored to do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Ward?
I guarantee you, the map that if I approve is legal. Because I understand everything that the corner part said about boundaries, drawings, deviation, because that one of the maps, if a possibility that Section 5 was in here, we would have a problem. But Section 5 is no longer.
Correct.
Right. So don't think I don't know what is not only a correct map, but I have a little mind to also went to some legal people on the map that I have seen or have someone to draw. It's legal. They know it's legal. So I'm not going to just give you a map or suggest that map is not right. I want to get that straight. Because my credibility lies there. And I just don't argue just to be arguing. So that's not the issue here. That's not the issue with me. I'm just saying, with the new growth, 10 more years from now, here we go back again. It hasn't changed in 20 years.
We cannot draw maps
Okay,
based
but
on
haven't changed
projected
in
growth
20 years.
in 10
But
years or
10 years
20
ago,
years.
we took, how we drew this map, 10 years ago, we got the same problem that we could have solved 10 years ago. Now
And
we're
this
doing the
is
same
not
thing.
10 years ago, and this
Yeah,
is
well,
not
10 years
10 years
ago,
in the future.
That was Nathan Borough wasn't even in existing, that you had to make, it was Sleepy Hole. And the community that you split up is now the same community that is.
That was not me.
Well, I don't know if it was you, but you might have been in the tail end of it.
That was not me.
You would have legislate, you wasn't going to argue about after the court. So
So-
you know a little bit about it.
Councilman Ward?
I'm done.
We
So, well, I want to make sure I understand. So Councilman Ward, are you not going to give me your proposed map? You said that you had a proposed third map.
Well, no, I don't know if I can do that. I'm just saying it's a possibility.
It would be,
I don't know. I got to ask Will. I mean, you the
Councilman
attorney.
Ward, Councilman Ward, your motion is going to be to have Mr. Lofton, his firm, prepare.
The third map.
Prepare a third map.
That'll be fine.
This will also offer the opportunity for
Let's
you
talk.
or anyone else on this dais to provide as much input as you would like to have as what was offered before. And Mr. Lofton was graciously made himself available, and he met with 5 individuals. I know some of y'all actually drove to Richmond, and he took his time to do exactly what we asked him to do, and I feel you will continue to do exactly what we asked for you to do.
Yes, sir.
So at this time, we have a motion to consider from Councilman Ward, which would be to direct, if there's any other, is there any other discussion of the motion? I'm sorry, Councilman Johnson.
I've got to ask a question or two. Mr. Lofton, this is an unfair question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you think you can legitimately come up with a third map that can pass muster as far as what we've asked you to do? Or are we just spinning wheels here? I know it's an unfair question, but it's going to affect the way I vote on this, because if we're just spinning wheels, what is the point?
Mr. Johnson, thank you for your question. No question from a judge is an unfair question, as much as you may not like it. I do think it is a bit of a spinning wheels exercise, but if the city council wants me to do it, I will look at it again. If Mr. Ward wants to tender whatever recommendations he has, I will look at them again. I want to, as I've shared with several of you, part of what has been driving this is a desire to protect incumbents, which we're allowed to do, which you are allowed to do. And so I'm happy to look at whatever information Mr. Ward has to see if another scenario is possible.
Okay, any other questions or comments, Councilman Fawcett?
Just one question. Mr. Lofton, just to piggyback off of what Councilman Johnson just asked you about a third drawing, is it potentially possible in the third drawing that you would not keep incumbents in their borough? Because there is a potential chance with the third drawing that would put somebody out of their borough in that drawing.
No, sir, the guidance that the city council gave me was to not do that.
I know that,
So
but a
I
third-
won't do that.
So it's going to be difficult to come up with a third drawing to be much different than drawing one or two that is going to do what?
I don't know, but I'm happy to look at it, if that is what city council wants me to do.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
And Mayor, can you just clarify that motion for me, please?
The motion, I believe,
Or Mr. Ward, could you clarify?
Mr. Ward's motion would be to direct Mr. Lofton to prepare a third map for consideration with the understanding that everyone will have the opportunity for further input in the preparation of the map. In regards to Mr. Foster's comments, the original parameters would have to be adhered to. He's already under the direction to do that, so, incumbents, neighborhoods, boundaries, all those would have to be adhered to. Whether he is capable of coming up with that third map is probably, whether he is or he isn't, the point is whether we want to give him the opportunity to do that. So I think time-wise, if we know about this, obviously, before the next meeting, then we would be right back where we are at this juncture at our next meeting. And then at that time, we would determine which maps would go forward for a public hearing. If that's, let me ask the city attorney, is that correct? If indeed the motion passes,
So
what would the process be?
in order for the city to adopt a redistricting plan, the steps that are required by the code, and then I'll talk about what the steps are that were required by city council. The code requires us to advertise whatever changes are going to be made in a newspaper for 2 weeks. And we have to place those changes, both a map and a written description of each election district, in the clerk's office for the public to view, and we can pick other places to place it. But that has to happen before you can take a vote on the map. So the first step that we have to do is identify which map or maps will the description be generated for to be advertised, advertise it, and then City Council, when it adopted its instructions, had instructed that we would have a public hearing on the map or maps. So that would need to take place after the 2-week advertisement, and at that point, City Council can vote on the maps.
So if I understand this correctly, if this motion goes forward, we would have to wait for a third map. And then at our next meeting, determine which maps would be brought forward for the public hearing, which would be the first meeting in February. We would still have 2 weeks between then and the first meeting in February. if I'm
Yes,
not
we
mistaken.
should be able to do that.
So
The only hangup is that right now, we just have maps, and we have maps that can show streets. We don't have a written description of the boundaries. We also don't have precincts and polling places identified. So a precinct, that is just a grouping of 500 to 5,000 people so that there's a group of people to vote. And then in each precinct, we have to identify a polling place. The code doesn't necessarily require us to do it all at one time. We've typically done it all at one time. But if we don't do it all at one time, each time we make a change, that 2-week advertising requirement comes into play.
Okay, so if we adhere to the process, I guess the bottom line is, can it be done if we direct Mr. Lofton to do a third map, bring it back at our next meeting, decide at the next meeting that we're going to bring option 1, 2, or 3 for a public hearing, and then in turn schedule the public hearing for the following month. Is that feasible?
I believe so, because we have an extra week sorry, I'm looking at December. So we are talking about the 19th. It will, I believe we can make the advertising requirement for the first meeting in February.
Okay, so that scenario, that timeline can work, because I think that's a factor, because if we start where we'd have to start calling special meetings and go into it, because I know this really needs to be done by the end of February. I mean, it's not a big rush, but it needs to be done by the end of February. So with that in mind, we can follow that process. So we do have a motion on the floor by Councilman Ward and a second from Councilman Williams. Once again, the motion is direct Mr. Lofton to prepare a third map for consideration by council. Madam Clerk, please call for the vote.
Councilmember Butler Barlow? Yes. Councilmember Fawcett?
No.
Councilmember Goldberg?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Ward?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bennett?
Yes.
Mayor Duman?
Yes.
The motion is approved by a vote of 7-1, with Councilmember Goldberg voting in opposition.
Mayor, could I make one comment?
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Bennett?
Mr. Roberts, I would request that the streets be identified where we can see.
Vice Mayor Bennett, if we could just limit those comments to later, everybody's going to have the opportunity to speak to him after the meeting, just like you did last time.
Okay, well, I
That's
thought
okay.
you wanted a little bit of direction. I was
No,
just-
not now.
Okay, all right,
No,
okay.
He's already got his basic direction, so any other comments that you want to incorporate into the map, that goes for everybody, including Mr. Ward, you can do it at a later time.
Correction for the record, I voted no. Said Councilman Goldberg.
You do vote no? I only heard,
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes, Councilman Fawcett did vote no.
okay. 6-2, Councilmember Fawcett and Councilmember Goldberg.
Okay. Mr. Lofton, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Hopefully there's not too many bruises when you get home.
No, sir, all good.
And I guess everybody will be speaking, and just so everybody understands it, same process. Do you want to put out now when would be a good time to contact you?
As soon as you like,
Anytime?
anytime.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that concludes our work session, and I understand we do have a motion for a closed meeting this evening. Madam Clerk, would you please read the motion for consideration?
Pursuant to Virginia Code Sections 2.2-3711A8 and A1, the consultation with legal counsel employed by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the legal advice of such counsel, and the discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for appointment and the assignment, appointment, and performance of specific public officers or appointees of the city, specifically the appointments as shown on the attached list for vacancies or term expirations for the Clean Community Commission, the Early Childhood Development Commission, the Economic Development Authority of the City of Suffolk, the Fine Arts Commission, the Historic Landmarks Commission, the Human Services Advisory Board, the Local Board of Building Code Appeals, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission, the Sister Cities Commission, the Planning Council, the Tidewater Youth Services Commission, and the Western Tidewater Community Services Board.
Council, a motion would be in order. Councilman Williams?
So move.
A motion for approval, Councilman Williams. Do I hear a second? Got a second by Vice Mayor Bennett. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Butler Barlow. Councilmember Fawcett. Councilmember Goldberg. Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Ward. Councilmember Williams.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bennett.
Yes.
Mayor Duman.
Yes,
The motion is approved by a vote of 8-0.
that concludes our work session, and we will reconvene at 6 p.m.